Well, we're in our series called Love Rules. And our previous 2 Sundays leading up to today has been very interesting, I think. The first Sunday we talked about God is love, and that's the place everything emerges from. Understanding foundationally God is love is pivotal if you're going to understand the Christian walk, what it means to walk in tune with God. Then last week, Jeff taught something that we don't hear very often, which is a part of love is learning how to love yourselves. How many of us have been really messed up about the fact that Jesus was clear, love your neighbor as yourself. We have so much self-hate and so much guilt and so much shame that sometimes that takes a while for us to figure out. Today, I want to talk to you about love as it relates to loving people inside of the church. Next week, we're going to take it a different direction. Jeff's going to take us outside the walls, but today we're inside the walls. Now, to get started, I want to give you 3 foundational truths, and I want you to stay with me because this might be different from what you have heard in previous churches. It's not necessarily traditional, and yet here it's the way we understand things. First one is this: we don't make a distinction between inside the church and outside the church in the way most churches do. Here's the traditional view, and this is from, I was a Baptist pastor for years, went to Baptist college, Baptist seminary. This is the way I saw things early in my ministry. Inside the walls of the church, that's good. Outside the walls of the church, bad. Inside the church, we have it together. How could I ever have thought that? I mean, that seems crazy to me, but that was the way that we thought. Outside the walls of the church, they don't have it together. Inside the walls of the church, spiritual hunger. Outside of the walls of the church, not so much spiritual hunger. Inside the church, heaven. Outside of the church, hell. Now, that was the platform that I operated on for much of my adult life. At the Village, we don't make the distinction that way. Here's what we have found. We believe the potential for good and evil runs through the hearts of every person on the planet. We believe that the potential for good and bad is in all of us. Inside the walls of the church, there are many people who have their lives pretty much together, and we salute you, we applaud you. That is a wonderful thing. But we also know inside the walls of the church, there are some people who don't have their lives together. And that's all right. That's okay. We've all been there. Inside the walls of the church, we believe there are many people who are spiritually tuned in. They just have a spiritual hum about their lives. They get it. But we have discovered outside the church, outside of the confines of religion as we know it, there are people who seem to have that spiritual hum, that tune in their life. They seem to be tuned in, even though they're not doing it exactly the way we do it. We know there are people inside the church who have real spiritual desire. I've met people outside the church who seem to have a real spiritual desire. Maybe it doesn't look exactly the way you want it to look, but they seem to have a spiritual desire. I've seen people inside the church with no spiritual desire. They come every Sunday, they maybe even serve, it's a part of their life, but they don't have any real spiritual desire. They do it because they were taught to do it as a child. They do it because maybe they get some kind of friendship, something is here, but it doesn't seem to be spiritually motivated. I see people outside the church, they don't have really any spiritual motivation at all. I know people inside the church, their lives just seem heavenly. I've met some people outside the church, their lives just seem heavenly to me. I've seen people inside the church, and their lives just kind of feel hellish. I've seen people outside the church, their lives just kind of seem hellish. So you ask me, Ray, what's the difference in people inside the church and outside the church? Well, write this down because I think it's important. The difference between people inside and outside of the Village is simply their proximity to you. The people sitting around you each week, that's the difference. You don't know if they're spiritually in tune. You don't know if they're spiritually out of tune. You don't know if they're hungering for God. You don't know if they're not hungering for God. You don't know if they have a deep, close devotion to Jesus. You don't know if they've walked in off the street and they're a million miles from knowing what devotion to Jesus is like. You don't know if they're going through a heavenly experience in their life where they feel like they're bumping heaven. You don't know if they're going through a horrible situation in their life, because inside the walls of the Village Church, all of that exists. I remember a lady coming to me one time and she said she was mad that everybody wasn't worshiping God the way she was worshiping God. And she said, one day I'm gonna run up and I'm gonna take the microphone from you. And it's like, whoa, don't do that. Don't do that, don't ever do that, number one. Number two, why would you think everybody should worship the way you worship? Everybody here is not at the same place in their life that you are. There are people here who are just gone through devastating loss. There are people here who don't even know if they believe in God because something horrific has happened to them and they sense maybe it's not real. They're here. Why do we want to force them to be something that they're not? We say, you be authentically you here and God will do his work in your life. So I just want you to understand that we don't have a dualism in our life that says in and out, good or bad. We see everybody is a mix of that. And so just understand that's a part of what we want you to get. So the difference between people inside and outside is their proximity to you. Get that. You have people sitting around you every week. Most of you sit in about the same section, about the same part of the church. And so you have people around you and maybe their lives are together, maybe their lives are not, but it's around you. All right, second foundational truth is this. Loving God is impossible apart from loving people. Loving God is impossible apart from loving people. Now, we go to church for many reasons. I get this. In an informal survey we've done here through the years, we find some people attend the Village because of the message of grace and hope. They sense that that's something different. They like that, and they say, that's why we're here. Some people say they attend the Village because of the authentic nature of worship. And I just want to say, I still just thank God. We have a man that is considered in Christianity one of the elite top tier worship leaders in the world, and he's at the Village Church. That blesses me beyond measure. I sometimes say, God, how did that happen? Thank you for sending Jimmy Mayo to us. But some people say that they attend because of the worship. Some people attend because they want to learn to be a better man or woman. And some people say they attend the Village as a way to show their love for God. I get that. But how do we show God we love him? We think about him, sure. We can sing to him, yes, that's good. We can give to support things we think maybe would be important to God, and that's wonderful and good. But the primary way to know we are loving God is when we love people. Get this, to love God requires that you love people. That's what Jimmy said a minute ago. And we don't talk about the message beforehand, but it's like, how'd you know? That's where I'm going with this. You've got to love people. 1 John 4:20 says this, whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother or sister, he's a liar. Whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they've seen cannot love God whom they've not seen. Very, very important for you to get that. We're going to talk about it in a couple of minutes. I hope it'll be helpful to you. Foundational truth number 3 is this. Almost all of us say we want to encounter God. I want to go to church, Ray, where I can encounter God. I get that. We want to experience something that transcends normal, something that transcends ordinary, something that just feels other dimension, something that we say, that's heavenly. We want to encounter him. I get it. When I love people inside the Village, I have discovered I profoundly encounter the presence of God. That's the foundational principle I want you to get. When I love people, this week I'm just talking about inside. Next week will be another whole talk. When I love people inside this place, there is just as great or greater a potential for me to have a transcendent moment as when I am singing with my eyes rolled back and my head back and my hands raised to heaven. I have a greater chance of a transcendent moment when I show love to someone inside the walls of this building than Jimmy at the climax of the greatest worship song we have ever done. Or me writing the biggest check of my life and saying, God, I'm giving this because I believe this is a ministry you want me to support. Bigger than that is when I have had those moments inside the walls of this place to just love somebody. I have sensed God's presence in a transformative type of way. Now, Jesus said this in Matthew 25. It's one of the great parables. He's talking about people receiving their reward. And some of the people that were rewarded and welcomed into heaven, they said, how did this happen to us? And the king in the parable said this, when I was at the lowest point of my life, you loved me. You didn't know it was me. When you saw the person that needed clothes, you clothed him. When you saw the person that was hungry, you fed him. When you saw the person that needed a visit, you visited them. You did all of these things. And they said, but Lord, that was for other people. That wasn't for you. And he said, no, you miss it. When you were doing it for them, I was where? I was in the midst. I was in the midst. It is a transformative process that happens, and God is there. It's transcendent. When you love another human being, and it happens here every Sunday, and yet sadly, many miss that part of it. Many people think I come to church just for the message, or I come to church just for the music. I just kind of get through the other stuff, but that's why I come. And most people don't think that there's an element here of love for people that is as important as anything. Yesterday, a lot of us were at this wedding for Stephen Kelly Morris. You don't know them. Stephen Kelly been in church a long time, and their daughter was getting married. So a bunch of us were there, and it hit me. We're sitting around the table talking. That little thing, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, see all the people. And so but it's been 50 years since I have done that. And so I was trying to remember how to do it, and it was messing up. I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so they were getting tickled, and it's like, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, see the people. So yesterday was hit and miss to do it, and I said, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not even gonna mention that tomorrow. So this morning, I hadn't even thought about it, but I was about to get in my car to come to church, and I thought, I wonder if I can do that. And so I said, here's the church, here's the steeple, open. So anyway, I get in my car, crank it up, and I'm sitting in my driveway, and I said, all right, let's try this again. Here is the church, here is the steeple, open the door and see all the people. And I did it like 2 times in a row, and I said, all right, one more time, do it carefully. Here is the church, here is the steeple, open the door and see all the people. And I heard on my Bluetooth, Ray, are you okay? It's like, I had butt dialed a guy that used to come to our church. I talked to him. Serious, I'm telling you the truth. You ask Billy Guzman. Billy Guzman called me this, or I called Billy Guzman this morning. He said, I see you're still doing real deep teachings at the Village Church. So anyway, do this with me. Here is the church. Here is the church. Here is the steeple. Open the door and see all the people. Very important for us to not forget we have to see all the people, all right? Very, very, very important. So how do we love the people in our church? Let me give you some quick thoughts. Practical, but quick. Write this down, please. Loving people starts with showing up regularly. It starts with showing up regularly. Now, I made a commitment in 1974. I wanted to follow God. Didn't know exactly what that meant. In fact, I didn't really know anything about what that meant. But I made some decisions in 1974. I said, I want to follow you, God. I'm in this thing, and I just made a commitment. As much as I can, I'm going to be at church every Sunday. I'm not saying I'm legalistic about it. If I was on vacation, I didn't always go. If I was deathly ill, I didn't go. But that was not going to be a decision for me every Sunday morning. I wonder if I want to go to church or not. Because in 1974, I said, God, I'm going to follow you, and I'm going, in my mind, maybe this was small, but in my mind, I committed I was going to get together weekly to worship with other believers, and I've always believed God might have a message for me, and if I didn't come to church, I might miss it. Maybe that's elementary, but I'm just telling you that's how I've always thought. So when I went through the worst period of my life, 1987, my life just crashed and burned. I didn't want to go to church. I was a single father, 2 little boys. Every Sunday morning, I'd get them up and we'd go to church. I was depressed. I was in despair. I was crushed. I was shame-filled. All of those things, I didn't want to go. I hated every minute of it. But I went because I thought, what if God has a message for me and I miss it because I'm asleep? I'm not actively trying to listen. It's not always been easy. There were times that I had to make myself go. And this is when I wasn't pastor. I know it's a little different when you're the pastor. You do have to be here. But I'm saying when I wasn't pastor, I made myself go. Now, I'm saying that to you because a lady came up to me, this is a couple of years ago, downtown Hapeville, I can tell you her name. She came up to me a couple of years ago, and she used to attend regularly, but she had stopped attending. And she was excited, and she said, Ray, did you know they've got your sermons up on the internet? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, there's cameras, I pick up on things, not really bright, but yes, I got that. And she said, I don't have to go to church anymore. She said, I just can wait at home for the sermons to come on the internet. And she said, no more people, don't have to deal with people. I can just come and watch it on the internet. And so she thought she was getting what God wanted for her to get by just tuning in on the internet and catching the talk. Somebody needs to teach her this, because this is important. There is just as great a chance as of God speaking to your heart through an encounter with a person here as there is the 30-minute talk that goes on here. There's just as good a chance God will speak to your heart through an encounter with another living, breathing human being in this place as there is with Jimmy leading us in praise and worship. We don't want to miss that, and you can miss it if you don't show up. If I'm not here, this is just a thought. If I'm not here, there is a potential love deficit in the room. Now think about that. I carry the love of God in my heart. If I just say arbitrarily, I may come, I maybe not come. When I'm not here, there is a love deficit, could be in the room, in the space I occupy. Instead of love, there could be a vacuum. And so I not only don't want to miss a message from God, I don't want to miss the chance for a love encounter with somebody where God's presence is going to be richly felt. And when I have wanted to stay home the most, and Jane will say this, when she has wanted to stay home the most, more times than not, when we get in the car at the end of the day, at the end of the service, tears and a story about how I talked to this person and God just was there. Or I talked to this person and it's just like I was the right one for that moment. I was there and I was able to talk to him and God was there. God was there. Very, very important. So people say this, Ray, I'm not sure I follow you. We're supposed to come to church for God, right? Not for others, but for God. Well, both. We come to church for God, but we understand that God is the foundation of all things. He is the ground of being for everything. And so we show our love for God by loving the people who are inside the walls because they have proximity to us. Hebrews 10:25 says this, don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. The writer is saying, don't stop going to church. Don't be unfaithful in church attendance. That's the way a lot of people are doing it. But no, you get together and encourage one another. That was a part of worship, encouraging one another. We need to be an encouragement to others. Practical application number 2 I want you to get is this. Loving people here means getting to know the people and getting to know their stories. Now, I don't want you to think as you look out across this attendance that you say, wow, there's 100, 150 people here. I don't know if I can know everybody. You can't. You're going to know maybe 30 people. In a church, 30, 40 people, kind of who you're going to know. Doesn't matter if the church has 150 people in attendance. Doesn't matter if the church has 5,000 people in attendance. You're going to know pretty well about 30, 40 people. But around you, you have the potential to learn who some of these people are, and that's a way you can begin to show love to them. We have people in our church. I didn't know this. Some of us have struggled with weight. You know, we want to be smaller, but we eat like we don't really want to be smaller. I mean, we just keep eating like we want to stay the same size. But we have a couple in our church. And one day I just found out that they had both been way heavier. For most of their life, they had been way heavier. But then because of some health situations, they just made some decisions and just changed the way they were doing things. And now they're slim and they're trim and they eat discipline. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. I began to think, I want to know these people. We've had people in our church who have had health situations, heart transplants. We've had more heart transplant people in our church than I think almost any church our size in the country. It's amazing, but we have people in our church who've had heart transplant. That's amazing to me. You need to learn that story. We have people in our church who have lost children to suicide. as difficult as anything. We have children in our church who have lost parents to suicide, as difficult as anything. We have people in our church who would tell you, if you got to know their story, once they trusted you, they would say they had made choices that led them to jail. And they were trying to figure out how to work their life in a better direction. You'd have people telling you about broken relationships they've had. We have families in our church born and raised in Jamaica. We have a lady in our church who was born and raised in the Netherlands. We have a lady in our church who spent many years living in Iceland. We have a lady in our church who was raised in Canada. We have a lady in our church whose son was featured in the Harvard Review, or one of the Harvard magazines. He is a graduate of Harvard University. He's considered one of the most unusual Harvard graduates because he is an off-the-chain intellectual, but he plays banjo. And so Harvard wrote this big article about how unusual it was that this guy is an intellectual, but he plays the banjo. We have people who would tell you of their business failures, and they would tell you that they also have had some business successes. We have a lady in our church, I never will forget, one time she was talking, and we were talking about our families, and she just opened up, and I could tell it was a moment that I didn't want to forget. She just opened up and she said, you know, y'all maybe don't know, but I was raised in foster care. And she said, my mom's still around, but she just wasn't really able to be a present mom when I was growing up, so I was in foster care. And she said, when I grew up, I went to find my dad, and she said, I could tell it was like she was struggling for words, but she wanted to say it. And she said, when I found my dad, he was in Florida. And this is not meant to be funny, y'all, so please don't laugh. But she said, when I found him, he was transgendered. He had become a female in his identity. And I'm sitting there because I was thinking, wow, I've never heard that story. And then it was like she just kind of breathed and she said, I've been in church all my life and I've never felt like I could say that, ever. And she said it, and it was like, it's a real story. It's a real story. Now you can say, well, I don't like that stuff. Well, go find you a perfect church somewhere and go sit in that one, because in our church we have stories. We have people who have real stories, and they're not afraid to tell them, and we get to learn those stories. We have people who've had incredible successes in our church. We have people who've had incredible failures in our church. We have people who've had public scandal in our church. We do. Jane told me one time the ladies' ministry had gotten together and they were taking food. There's a trailer park in the Tri-Cities area that is the poorest of the poor. It looks third world country. It looks that poor. And so they had provided food because when school is not in session, these kids that live there don't have food. I mean, it's really pitiful. And so they were taking the food over, and as they were delivering the food to these children, they discovered one of the ladies in our group said, y'all don't know this, but this is where I grew up. This is where I grew up. And now she's taking things and she's delivering them. But they got to learn that story. So learning people's stories is a beautiful thing. It's the way we get to love, is we listen to people's stories. We don't judge them, we just listen. One of the beautiful things about life in a true spiritual community is this: you get to know and be known. That only happens in a true spiritual community. You get to know and be known. No false pretense. You know, I preached for a long time having to be the perfect pastor, the perfect read the Bible every day, pray every day, no faults ever on my list, everybody else but not me. That's exhausting. That is exhausting. And it's a crazy system that we developed. It's much better to be able to say, you know what? I do have a desire to follow God. I really do. And some days it's hit, and some days it's not as much a hit. Some days it's a miss. But when I miss, I discover He's a good, good Father. And I can get up and I can try again. You want to love people inside the church, get to know them, learn their story, encourage them in their faith walk, empathize with them in their pain, and don't judge them. You want to learn a little mantra? God does the judging, we do the loving. That's what we do. God does the judging, we do the loving. That's an easy way to live, much smarter than the other way where you're going to try to figure out, is that a sin I need to be fixing in them? Just love them. Just love them. And people say, well, I like that thing. Love the sinner, hate the sin. And it's like, how about love the sinner and hate your own sin? You got enough sin in you. Just hate your sin and don't worry about their sin, all right? Don't worry about their sin, all right? All right, we're going to move quickly. Loving people here involves some form of serving. I just want you to know, if you really want it to be about, here's the steep, well, crap, I forgot how to do it, but you know what I'm talking about. You really want it to be about the people. Here's what you cannot forget. It involves some serving. It involves some serving. I never will forget, we have a businessman started coming to our church recently, very, very successful businessman. He met a guy in our church who had some health needs. I did not even know they had met. And then one day I discovered that this businessman, very, very successful businessman, had picked up this man who had some severe health needs and had taken him to Grady and spent a day with him, getting him to the doctors and to the places he needed to go. And I started to weep when I heard that, because it's like, that guy just came into our church. And he just intuitively knew that if you find somebody sitting close to you and you can help them, you just help them. You just help them. That's a beautiful thing. We've been operating without a lot of ushers and greeters. Thank God for the few that we have that are here every week. We don't have many right now. Jeff is looking to recruit a team of people who would say, I love God and I love people. And so you put me down, I'll be here. I'll welcome people at the door. I'll hold the door open. I'll answer questions if they have questions. If there's a crying baby, I'll know how to help them find a way to get out of the middle of the spotlight of everything. I'll help them. You would think a church our size, 300 or 400 people come as far as mixed in we have about 300 or 400 that would say they're faithful attenders here. But I wonder if any of you would say, Jeff, put me down, because I want to love people. I can't do a lot, but I could be here. I could be here 30 minutes early. I could be here. I could be here and lock up if I needed to lock up at the end of the day. Put me down, I want to help. We have a lady in our church, she's in her 70s. She used to drive by the church and she used to say, somebody needs to take care of the weeding the flower beds. They look horrible. So she did this for months. Then Jane and I came up here one day, and Jane, I don't notice stuff like this. Jane said, do you see the flower beds? I said, where are the flower beds? She said, right there's the flower beds. I said, oh yeah, no, I didn't see. And she said, look, there, it's weeded. So she did some investigating and found out the lady in her 70s who had driven by for months, who said, I wonder why somebody won't do that, realized one day, I'm a somebody. I could go up there and I could do that. And you know what? She's done it ever since. She's done it ever since. That's awesome. Yeah, that's worth a hand clap, It just needs to be more than just singing and listening to the talks, y'all. It needs to be about how can you serve. We have media people who are here who serve because they feel like it helps you if you can see it on the screens. It gives people a way to follow their scriptures. So they're here to help you. They get here very early on Sundays. The praise team, it's not about performance for them. It's about helping you, loving you as they love God, pulling you into the experience with them. It's about serving. One final thing I want to say is this. Loving people here means finding some villagers you can form deeper relationships with, and one way we do that is in our village groups. Those are little groups. Remember in the old days you had Sunday school classes? Everybody went to Sunday school at 9:30 on Sunday mornings. We don't do that anymore. What we do is we say, we're going to have a village group. Maybe it'll meet at my house on Sunday night, or there'll be a group meeting at Ethan and Rachel's on a Wednesday, or at Jeff's house on a Sunday, or Ray and Mars. Different people have groups in their house. You come in, and over an hour, hour and a half, you break bread together, you share what's going on in your life, you get to know people, and something really profound happens. Let me show you a picture of Bob and Joe on the screen. This is Bob, Stacy, on the left. I never will forget when we first moved to Hapeville, Bob stuck his head in the church. We were working across the street trying to get the building ready. And Bob said, y'all let gay people come here? He's so funny. It's like, yes. So he and Joe began to come to our church. They never missed. They were in a small group with us. We had a wonderful small group. Found out some things about Bob. Found out he had had some real pain in his life. His daughter had died very, very tragically. Found out Bob was a bus driver, and early in the morning, like pre-dawn, he was filling up gas, going to get gas at the bus barn where you get gas as a school bus driver. And his best friend was a bus driver, a real small lady. And she was walking in front of his bus, pre-dawn. She dropped something. She bent over to pick it up. The bus in front of him pulled off. Bob pulled ahead, and he felt a thump and discovered it was his best friend, and she died. We found that out in a small group as tears ran down his face. And we were able to pray with him and love him. So he gets sick, and people in the church began to take him to get groceries. And when he was too sick to get groceries, they'd pick him up and bring him to him. Or they'd take him to a doctor when he had a doctor's appointment and Joe was at work. And then when he was at the hospital, church people went by to visit with him. And yesterday, when we knew the end was near, church people began to go by to pray, let Joe know they love him, because they had learned deep love, deep love, deep love. That's what church is supposed to be. Love rules, you know. Love rules. And it needs to rule in our hearts, in this place. Make sure you don't forget to love all the people. I want to pray, and then I want you to see a video that's just going to be a little cute thing about small groups, and then Jeff will be up, all right? Father, I pray that you'll take this message, simple message, and I pray you'll cause it to resonate in our hearts. The missing ingredient in our lives very well might be that we have not loved people inside the church. Help us make that a priority, for when we love people, we know we love you, and we pray this in Christ's name.
What I like most about the village groups is being able to meet my fellow parishioners. Everybody shares their own views, and we have a wonderful time.
What I like most about the Village Church is how safe it is. No matter what question you have, or if you have anything that you need to talk about, it's an open place where you can feel safe.
What I love most about Village Group is the ability that we've had to actually host a group every other Wednesday night. That has been such a blessing to have members of this church come to our home so that we can get to know each other better and just experience a deeper relationship.
Being able to open up new channels of communication to build a close relationship with God, and using people to do that. And it's great to just fellowship and make new friends and new family.
What I love most about village groups is when we actually get to go into the community, and whether we're collecting food for the homeless or clothes or school supplies, that we get to do it as a church family to really make a difference in the community around us.
You get to fellowship with people on a different level. You get to experience a part of their world, you know, not just on a Sunday, but during the week.
Getting together, sharing a meal, discussing Sunday's topic in church, and seeing people afterwards and hugging on everybody, it brings us really close together.
And I think what I love most about the groups is just when we get to meet together every couple of weeks, we really get to dive deeper into conversation than we would just saying hey to each other at church. And so we get to know each other on a deeper level.
Of course, the fellowship, but of course we enjoy our wine and Rachel's brownies. But of course we do enjoy being invited into someone's home each week.
Knowing more about the people, more and more about the church, where the church is heading.
Being able to bring what's going on in my life to the table, to people who may not have gone through what I've gone through, and being able to use what they've gone through to apply in my life too.
What I like most is being able to converse with people that are way more knowledgeable on the subject than I am. Because I have a lot of questions, and it's good to hear it from different perspectives.
I get to learn things about people you wouldn't normally know about them just coming to church, so that's kind of cool.
It's different.
It is different. People are going to think we're a couple because all they've been doing is couples, but that's not the way it is.
They're going to think I'm his mom. Grandma.